Today, I apologize for that. That's okay. I have a bad voice. Not sick, just laryngitis. So, what I would love to remind folks, with our chairmen who are present, Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend, who are virtual, when we first started talking, and I know our former legislators who are listening in today will respect this. We had decided with the group that instead of just submitting a 1 or 2 paragraph summary to the legislature expressing an interest in just extending our work and stating that given the vote on Monday with the medic fill extension, that we were going to do a quick little summary update on the activities to date without a ton of recommendations or options. And so I know for me and for Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend, it was really important, we thought, to perhaps provide a little more of a skeleton, maybe 3 or 4 pages. It turned out to be like 7 or so of a draft report. Mind you, if for some reason, we don't come to consensus today, which I hope we do, if for some reason we don't, the representative, the senator and I, are fine, with the committee just submitting a note to the governor's office and a note to the General Assembly, stating, given the extension with the medic fill, that we will continue to be working without giving a report. So to me, I hope that today we can kind of come to a consensus. I would love for the governor's office and the General Assembly to see what we prepared. And I know Senate Bill 29 brought us here because the retirees don't want Medicare Advantage only. I think that is a clear comment that we've heard daily and weekly from folks. So I just wanted to lay that table today. So if for some reason we don't come to agreement on items, we are okay. We're fine to just submit a 2 or 3 paragraph item. So I just wanted people to take the pressure off. So nobody feels pressure today. The really important parts of the agenda follow later, because I think getting to those options, having really tangible, measurable results for us to give to the legislature is more important than, today taking a ton of time on a, summary report. So with that, I'm going to turn to Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend to see if they have anything they'd like to say. And if not, we can go right to the report and go section by section if you want. Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Senator Governor. No, I think you summed it up very well. Thank you very much.
I echo my colleagues' comments. Thank you.
Great. All right. So that members know, I can prepare. We can have a 2 or 3 paragraph statement prepared if we don't. And I hope that takes pressure off, because I don't want people feeling pressure, because we want to get this stuff right. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to turn it over to Faith, if you want to go lead us through, or how you would like to do this.
Sure. And I Lieutenant Governor, thank you. I think we talked about the possibility of just deferring on approval of the minutes until the next meeting. So
yeah,
we can move straight into public comment.
Yep, let's keep going.
Related to the report. So just to guide folks through today's agenda, we're gonna take public comment at this time specific to the draft initial report, and then open up discussion with subcommittee members on any additional edits or modifications to that draft report. We will move on as time permits and do a brief overview on the health reimbursement account and individual marketplace. And then we also would like to try to, before adjourning today's meeting, have a brief discussion about the other post-employment benefit options that the subcommittee members are interested in evaluating further. So this goes back to some feedback we received at the last meeting about the potential of removing, adding, settling, in reaching some agreement on which options the group would like to further evaluate. That will help inform us as we develop agendas for the meetings for May through August. And then we will have public comment again briefly at the end of the meeting. I think we are trying to stick with a noon to adjourn the meeting. I know there's some conflicts for some of the subcommittee members today. So that said.
And that should address hopefully for Mr. Tashner and others, having the summer meetings, hopefully with, those teachers who especially have expressed interest. So
Absolutely.
have their participation, right?
Right.
All right.
So
The only thing I would offer, Lieutenant Governor, I hate to jump in, a lot of teachers teach summer school, so we still need to be mindful of that, right? School doesn't
True.
stop in the summer.
True. But then I also have the flip, as you know, my nurses who work day shift who like to listen at night. So, so it's the reverse, or like to listen during the day and work night. So I think you're right. We'll try to do a little bit. If we can do a little bit of both, we'll try. Thank you, Jeff. Always mindful. I always have Jeff Tasher in my mind.
There is a hand up.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi, Denise.
From a subcommittee member. Yes, Denise.
I just want to be real quick and can we put a blanket statement in the chat or question and answer? I can't remember which section, so that the public who maybe has a question, they know that we look at them and they can go to, you had a link to where they
Yes.
can.
Good idea. Thank you, Denise.
Already in there.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And Denise, we have that posted in the chat. Thank you for that
Oh,
reminder.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Denise. We love your backdrop. We're jealous. You look like you're somewhere sunny and fun and fishing. All right, 1 year we'll go sunny, fun and fishing, right? All right, continue.
All right, so I'm gonna ask for Carol and Kristen to help out here. We do have pre-registered public comment specific to the initial draft report. And if we could go ahead and.
Just hear from the public as we want to do it that way. Oh, good. That's what we said.
Yeah.
So some of the folks
Should
who
we-
did pre-register did not indicate if they wanted to speak about the draft report or if they wanted to speak at the end of the meeting. So I'm just gonna ask you as I go through this, if right now we wanna take comment on the draft report. So Barbara Philbin, would you like to speak about the draft report?
Star 6 if you need to unmute.
Yeah, so I guess I want to speak about more than the report, but I'll start now.
Okay.
And I have 3 minutes, is that right?
Right. If it's not about the report, are you able to stay to the end of the meeting? Because we really want to focus right now on the report. And I don't know how it happened, but it's the way the world operates. Some folks got the report before it went public, but hopefully everybody has the right report.
No,
We'll work it out the same.
That's fine, I'll wait till the end.
Are you here? Okay, Barbara, we don't want to not hear from you. So we'll save it to the end if it's not the report. Thank you.
Okay, the next person is Nancy Altieri. Nancy, do you want to speak on the report or at the end?
Star 6, Nancy, you can't unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'll wait until the end.
And you're able to wait, okay. And please keep in mind, we created a specific web link and a fact sheet where you can ask questions and we'll try to answer them. So if you do have to jump off, okay?
Okay, the next person is Mary Graham. Mary, would you like to speak about the report?
Yes, please.
Yep, we can hear you, Mary.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes, I do want to speak about the draft report because it reminds me of a sweet gum tree. The fruits of the tree that are visible in the spring are going to turn into hard, spiky balls that your bare feet will unfortunately find in the fall. And there are lots of gumball fruits in this report that I suggest you get rid of now to avoid them becoming spikes under your feet later. And I start with the premise that the RHBAS report should not get into issues that have to do with the litigation that's ongoing. And because those issues are not relevant to the committee's work and were not even studied by the committee. And there are gumballs in this report that fall in that category. I'm going to mention 2 or 3 of them given the time limits, but we've set out in the draft that we sent you others. One that's very important is the report says that the budget last year included language that recategorized the state plan to Medicare Advantage. Well, notice there's no cite to that, and I don't believe the committee has even looked at the language that is probably being referred to, let alone studied it, and concluded that it recategorized the retiree healthcare plan. If that were the case, that might limit your your carrying out of this duty, which I don't think is appropriate. So I would say, please take this out of the report. And in fact, I would note that the court said in its October 2022 opinion that there is no specific statutory directive for the SEBC to force all retirees from their state subsidized benefits to a Medicare Advantage plan or otherwise lose benefits. So I think that's completely irrelevant reference, and we don't even know what it's talking about, and you haven't studied it, I don't believe. Second, I want to mention something that I've mentioned previously, where it talks about the RBSC concluding that combining certain options was going to provide the best way to handle this problem. And I don't believe there has been any conclusion by the RBSC ever about that. And I think, in fact, WTW, when I mentioned that at the last meeting, effectively agreed to that. So don't limit yourselves to that you have to do 3 different things, because I know Secretary Geisenberger, you loved your 3 buckets, but this committee should operate independently and really look at this. Finally, I want to just address the comment about after public meetings that the SEBC adopted Medicare Advantage. Well, there were not true public meetings in the sense of meetings where the public could participate, and that's something that the court found, and it's in the opinion, but I won't take time to read you from that. What I would say in conclusion is, please do not be drawn in this report into gratuitous statements that get into litigation issues that were not even studied by this committee and are not relevant. These are not necessary for the report, and they just would make the RHBAS look like a blind follower of the administration without even realizing this was happening. Thank you.
Right to the time. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next up is Rebecca Scarborough.
You might just say it louder. Rebecca Scarborough.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, super. All right. I'm a pensioner. And in reviewing, and I am talking about the draft, in reviewing the draft document and the rest of today's presentation, I was both surprised and alarmed to see that Medicare Advantage was still described as closely mirroring our present MedicFill supplement. This is not true. Check out page 6 of your draft report, bullet 6 under additional options. Check out page 25, which is page 7 of the additional WTW report under options to reduce OPEB liability, the 6th dash. Highmark's supposedly customized MA plan with its 40-some pages of prior authorizations and its very problematic issues with both in-state and out-of-state networks, among other concerns, does not, I repeat, does not closely mirror our MedicFill. Apparently, state officials, including our own governor, have failed to listen to all the research and evidence presented to them regarding the perils of privatized Medicare Advantage plans, which are putting at risk original Medicare and the Medicare Trust Fund. Where are the fingerprints of the retirees and union representatives of this subcommittee on this draft document, I ask? Thank you.
Good. Done early. Thank you, Rebecca.
Next up is former Senator Karen Peterson.
Senator Peterson, you can hear us?
I'm here.
Okay, yep, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The description of public comments on page 3 in the second paragraph is seriously understated and should be expanded to include a more accurate description of the concerns expressed in the public comments during the various meetings. I suggest changing the first sentence in that section to read as follows. Public comments generally express dissatisfaction with the pre-authorization requirements for 2030 tests, procedures, and medications, co-pays, co-insurance, deductibles, cost share fees, and $1,000 out-of-pocket expenses not currently charged under MedicFill, and in-network and out-of-network limitations on physicians and facilities. So I would ask that you replace the first sentence of the second paragraph with that language. I also wholeheartedly support adding a final section to the report to state that Medicare Advantage will not be recommended as the only option for retirees or for a Medicare Advantage default plan. Finally, I have heard some subcommittee members say that what retirees want is choice. I, as one retiree, do not want choice. I want what I was promised during my 42 years of state service, a fully paid Medicare supplement plan. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Done early. Thank you, Senator.
Next up is Bob Clarkin.
Mr. Clarkin?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Bob Clarkin. I'm retired from the Department of Labor. And I think it's really important to have accurate financial information in your report. So I'd like to draw your attention to page 5 of the draft report, which states that the estimated cost of the gift to continue the special Medicare supplement plan through June 30th, 2024 are estimated to be $38 to $40 million. The Willis Towers Watson financial report for the second quarter of FY23, which we're in right now, indicates a 6-month cost of $32 million. The range in the report is overstated by $6 million or 19%. I think a way more realistic range would be 32 to 34 million instead of 38 to 40 million. I think it's very important not to overstate the cost of our great Medicare plan. And I'd also like to echo the comments from Karen Peterson. And I would like the following recommendation to be added to the end of the report. The committee has received and weighed public concerns regarding Medicare Advantage plans. It is the position of the committee that a Medicare Advantage only plan for retirees will not be recommended. And I would like to thank Wayne Emsley for adding this same phrase to the end of his draft report that he placed on the table during your April 3rd meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clarkin. Okay, who's next?
In person.
Anybody here?
Is there anyone in the room?
Anybody, would you like to say anything
Well, I'm not sure
about the report?
about the report, but what comes at the end then?
Just general public comment. If you prefer to wait, we'll have you then.
Well, I don't know. Are you gonna vote? I mean, when should I best get my points across?
Is it about the report or is it about in general, sir?
I guess it's in general.
Well, we'll have probably better at the end because we're kind of like just really focused right now. You know, if we do move forward with the report, we're just trying to gather information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Yep, sure thing.
We'll go back to online. So Tom Pledgey.
Mr. Pledgey. Are you there? *6 if you're on your phone. Huh. Did he get kicked out? Or is he not here? Have you all seen him today out there?
He's here.
Huh. Maybe he'll come back.
He's there and his talking is permitted.
Huh.
So we'll come back to him.
All right.
We have Joan Del Fattore. Hope I said that right.
Mm-hmm. Joan? Hello, is Del Fattore? Strange, you're unmuted. We'll go back to them. Do you want to keep going?
We have one more person, Diana Noonan.
Hi, I'm here.
Great, we can hear you.
My name's Diana Noonan, and as always, I speak for my husband and myself. Over the past few months, the anxiety and worry caused by
Diana, I don't mean to cut you off. Are you talking about the report or just general public comment?
I'm talking about the report.
Okay, continue. I'll give you that extra second. Okay, keep going. Yep.
Over the
Thank you.
past few months, the anxiety and worry caused by the state's process to determine senior health care has been extremely severe. It is not overstating to say that the state retirees are experiencing a myriad of emotions, a loss of sleep, and complete frustration. Again, over and over, we remind you that we were hired with a promise of exceptional health care at retirement, along with other retirement benefits, which I would also remind you were presented to us in writing at the time of our hiring, as well as the time of our retirement. It seems unconscionable and totally a betrayal to conclude that anything less than grandfathering current pensioners is acceptable. I read the draft of the committee's recommendation last night, and I am not unsurprisingly disappointed. The High Mark Advantage plan has been proven to be less than honest in its presentation. And the HRA plan, as stated, $5,100 a year, is about half what it would cost a pensioner to replace and obtain equal medical coverage to our current plan. I do not believe that either of these options comply with the mandate to come up with an equitable and fair retiree benefit plan. I also take exception to the idea that retirees have been given the ability to have meaningful public comment. We did not have a conversation or a discussion. We had a few minutes to spout out a point or two, but not to ask questions and hold a discussion that would allow communication that was meaningful. Then there is the point that the pool of retirees making public comments is limited because the majority of state retirees have no idea that this process is happening or of the consequences involved, because all 30,000 state retirees have not been adequately notified. Many pensioners are elderly without computer access or the knowledge of how to attain the necessary information. I believe that the fair way to handle notification is to send pensioners written notice by mail. It seems that retirees can expect 8 more SEBC committee meetings before a final recommendation and determination is formed. I respectfully request that you do better. It does no good to dedicate one meeting to retiree comments if we receive no prior notice and if we still are only allowed 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Linda Hastings.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I concur with the sentiments that have been expressed by the previous speakers. And I did not see this report until late last night. So there's more that needs to be said about it that's wrong. But I was happy to hear this morning that Lieutenant Governor is saying that if there is not agreement within the subcommittee, that this document will not be forwarded. I think this document is not ready for prime time. There are too many discrepancies in it between what's said here and what we retirees think is true. You did not do as I thought you would at the end of the last meeting, and that is talk about what recommendations could be agreed to, which I thought was going to be regarding Medicare Advantage as being the only plan for state retirees. I thought you were prepared to reject that. It's not in here. And there were things in here that, like the group MA plan closely mirroring Medicare supplement. That's not true. And if it had been true, I don't think we would have gotten a stay from the court. So I think that should not be in here. There's a lot that's wrong with this. And if you were prepared to send a few paragraphs, as opposed to this document upon which I don't think there is really agreement, that would be better. I'm reminded of the letter that I'm holding in my hand that I got on June 1st, 2022, which began, on behalf of the SEBC, we are excited to share positive changes. This feels a little like that. And I think that this is not something you should put your name on, and it shouldn't go out with anyone thinking that we retirees think that this is right. if you put out a few paragraphs saying that at least we've met and the work will continue, I hope you'll say, and we have decided that we're not going forward with the Medicare Advantage only thing. But if you can't say that, then don't say anything wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
We just have some phone numbers, so last 4 digits is 6756. Can you please state your name?
The 3696756 *6. If you hit *6.
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
we can hear you. Yep, go ahead.
Hi, this is Lisa Diller from Rise, Delaware. I would just like to make the point that, okay, now I can see the clock going, that the attempt to push retirees into Medicare Advantage was really why we got started. And we think we've proved our point over and over again that Medicare Advantage is not what we were promised in retirement. I'm not going to go and rehash all of the excellent points made during these meetings, but I would just like to say this. Any retiree deserves to know that Medicare Advantage is out of the question and off the table by adding a statement in this report to this effect. If you are just sending a few paragraphs, fine, but the report should not reflect all of the old inaccuracies that we've heard over the last few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Okay, 239, I'm sorry, 3996099. Can you please state your name?
Hello. Hello. Hi,
Yes.
This is Tom Pudgy. Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Hello. Okay.
We got you.
Good morning. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for the public comment period. I have a couple of very brief comments. One is on the top of page 3, the second paragraph reads to the effect, public comments generally express dissatisfaction. That should be changed to public comments totally express dissatisfaction. I defy anyone on the committee to see the tapes and see if anybody gave anything but dissatisfaction with going to the Medicare Advantage plan. Second, as you go on to page number, let's see, it's page number 5, I am a bit confused with the SEBC decision regarding the Medicare plan for FY24. Item 3 reads, to prepare the required written materials and notification to state retirees regarding the October 23 Medicare open enrollment, the SEBC needs to have the January 1, 2024 Medicare plan coverage plan in place by June of 2023. In the past, when Joanna sent out the information, that's Joanna Adams, about open enrollment, such as she did this past year on October 28th, that open enrollment was for a 12-month period beginning in January of the upcoming year, going through December. What is the SEBC proposing to do with item number 3? Are they going to make a recommendation that they move toward Medicare Advantage only and serve us that notice by surprise? This item seems out of place. Again, what happened last year was Joanna sent out the rate sheets. Those sheets were for 12 months. Right now, you're in a mixed situation. What are you going to notify us, and when will the SEBC do it? I fully support the final point is that the Medicare Advantage only option should be off the table. And that should be communicated to the 30,000 state retirees. Every month, we get an envelope from Joanna's office, and in that is our statement. You can easily put a full report of what the committee has been doing, the upcoming meetings for the next 2 or 3 months, and a draft report in there on a 2 or 3 page handout. You're paying first-class postage for that to be sent to me every month. First-class postage allows up to 5 single pages to be in that envelope. Why not let every state employee know what is going on? Thank you.
Thank you. Right to the minute. Second. All right.
Okay, we're gonna try to go back to Joan Del Fattore.
Joan, are you there? Star 6. She must be having audio issues.
Okay, that's it.
All right. Again, to the committee, I know many of us have a 12 o'clock hard stop. The latter items on the agenda are hugely
Can you hear me?
important. Oh, there you go, Joan. Go ahead.
I'm Joan Del Fattore. I'm retired from the University of Delaware. And thank you very much for accommodating the problems with the sound system. We keep being urged to look through the windshield and not the rearview mirror, which I think is a very good idea. But that has to go both ways. There's not going to be unilateral disarmament. Document after document repeats that public meetings were held. They were public in the sense that anybody who knew about them could have attended. But the way the general public would know about them would be if we were in the habit of checking the state website on a regular basis to check the agendas to see what's coming up. And even if that were an acceptable standard, there was not a clear statement in those agendas. We are talking about taking you off Medicare and putting you on Medicare Advantage. It's been well stated, Medicare Advantage does not mirror special Medicare. There are many ways in which it does not and cannot. Even going forward, it can't, because the business model of Medicare Advantage includes a network and includes pre-approval. There is no way it could be shaped and still be Medicare Advantage and mirror original Medicare. So I urge the committee and the subcommittee, please stop making these highly contentious claims if you want to move the discussion forward and not have people constantly reiterating the same points back. You're not going to be able to say that and not have us push back with the opposite. I also take just a moment to reiterate my suggestion from last week. Really would be very helpful if this subcommittee could do what the SEBC does and have meetings that are in a format where the attendees can see who all is there, as we could if we looked around a public meeting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it. All right, with my co-chairs here, Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend, we definitely know we wanted a full hour to delineate to those latter items, 7, 8, and 9, 7 and 8 for sure. My question then goes to, before I go to the subcommittee, I don't know if Representative Bombach or Senator Townsend have anything to say. I would like to get a sense, from committee members, because we did want to go section by section of the report. If you all want to see where we are at 11, because the bottom line is we have to either submit something very condensed or what we have prepared here with subcommittee feedback with edits. Again, the goal of this was not, and I want everybody listening in, was not to have us give options or recommendations at this time. Our goal was to simply state the summary facts of what had occurred to date with the roadmap of what had been discussed. So I'm going to stop talking, see if my co-chairs have any thoughts, and then open it to the whole subcommittee. Because I really know that the latter portions are really important to us to look forward. Go ahead. Anybody here? Paul?
Talk to the chairs first. To the co-chairs.
Yeah, I'd like to go to the subcommittees, give them an opportunity to speak and share their views.
All right. And Senator Townsend, I don't know if you're there. I know you were in and out with the
No,
audio.
I concur with Paul.
All right, let's just see what the subcommittee thinks. We have a couple hands up. Jeff Tasker.
Thank
And
you,
Representative Overly's there and Mike Regatta. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I'd like to suggest, so that we can give time to 7, 8, and 9, that we defer consideration of this report to the next meeting. We received it a little over 40 hours ago. There's a lot of information that I know I would benefit additional time to look at, especially in light of the public comments today. So my recommendation to the committee would be to not take final action on this report, to take you up on your invitation to send a couple paragraphs to the governor and to the General Assembly, give the attention we need to the more important agenda items, and then have the benefit of additional time and the public comments to take a further, deeper look at the report, because it is incredibly important that if we're going to do it, we get it right. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if that was a motion, I'd second that. This is Representative Ramon.
I'll make it a motion. I'll make it a motion to defer if he wants to make it a second.
He made
I
it.
second.
Okay, second. Is there a discussion from others? Mike Legato and Representative Overly.
I completely concur with Jeff's point of view and Representative Ramon. I mean, there are a number of issues in this report that go beyond just Medicare Advantage or HRAs. I mean, there are issues in here involving raising the retirement age in order to qualify for a full state share of healthcare coverage, and that has consequences on the pension fund. You know, Dave could probably speak more clearly to that than I could, but you know, there's a lot contained in here and a lot to absorb over a very limited period of time that, you know, I think it's premature to issue a report of this nature. Second, the second point that I'd like to make is, quite honestly, I'm sick and tired of hearing about Medicare Advantage. And I'd like to dispense with any further discussion around Medicare Advantage. I see it as a non-starter. I think we ought to focus on viable alternatives that are similar, if not the same, to Medicare coverage for state retirees. So I would throw that out there. You know, I've heard about Medicare Advantage ad nauseum, and I think I speak for a lot of retirees as well as members on this committee. So I throw that out for consideration.
Thank you. And any other subcommittee members? Secretary DeMatteis?
Hi, I'm just pulling up, so I'm still on phone, but I'll be in person in a couple of minutes. But I do want to set the record straight on a couple of things. I understand you may be sick of hearing about Medicare Advantage, but there were hundreds of retirees who we heard from who for the first time could qualify and participate in state pension or healthcare because the cost of Medicare Advantage per month was only $216 per month. So when the court order came down, there were a number of hundreds of retirees that we had to notify that they were not going to be able to participate in the state health care plan for pensioners. So I think it's really important to keep those hundreds of pensioners in mind. There's, you know, Mr. Pileggi made the comment that it was total dissent. Well, it's not total dissent. There are hundreds of pensioners that we've heard from that are not able to participate in state pension or health care because the Medicare plan is too expensive for the folks who have to pay their own share. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Denise.
So, you know, not to be disrespectful, but I have to say, where are those hundreds that you're talking about? I mean, we continue to hear. It is, I have to agree with Tom Pileggi. It has been totally display of dissatisfaction. And I have not heard even one. When you say hundreds, we haven't even heard one. So I have to agree that, you know, Medicare Advantage, we need to take that off the table. It is not, we need to look at there are so many other viable options to take care of our retirees.
Madam Chair, if I may interrupt. Madam Chair.
Yes. Right. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second before us. As long as
we have a motion and a second.
Yes.
Yes, I was just thinking because we had a motion and a second, the discussion at this point is just whether or not we are going to vote on on what the motion was.
Right, well, I was allowing a little additional commentary around it because it went a little broader, because I was thinking that, and I don't want to just call that question until I hear from everybody who's here, because it's all relevant.
Madam Chair, if I might respond to Secretary DeMatteis's comments, I think a lot of those people, or probably, I don't know how many there were that were interested in Medicare Advantage, were not aware of all the facts at the time. I mean, they were not aware of over 2,000 prior authorizations required and the ramifications around that. So, you know, I think it's a little bit unfair to say there was this hue and cry for Medicare Advantage when in fact it was not based on the facts at the time.
Yeah, and that's just not accurate. They came
I
to the
think it
public
is
hearings.
accurate,
No,
Madam
they were
Secretary.
at
All
the
right,
public
we're not
hearings.
gonna get into
No,
a
they
debate,
were at the public
guys.
hearings.
We're not gonna get into a
They were
debate.
at the public hearings and they heard everything. So that is just not accurate.
Well, I'll tell you,
Chair,
I'll tell you what the
Excuse me,
Secretary-
I don't have my gavel. God, I'm missing my gavel.
Excuse me.
I need to be in the Senate.
Excuse
All
me.
right.
Madam Chair,
May I call for a
Madam
vote
Chair, I
on the
can't-
motion,
Ah,
please?
wait, guys.
May I call for a vote on the motion, please?
Yes, before you do, I think I need to make a very valid point. We cannot delay and table this. We either are going to have to change the motion, because if we delay, we have to have the report May 1. We are not meeting again. So I don't know if Mr. Tashner would like to rephrase his point of his motion, or if somebody else would. We are either going to have to not issue the broad report and just go with a 3 to 4 paragraph summary, because we are not meeting again by May 1. So I need to
Madam
clarify
Chair,
that.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion, if.
Well, we have
with the
to, like, we have a
consideration
motion.
of-
We have
I
a
would like to
motion
amend the-
before us,
amend the motion.
Representative.
Okay,
We
thank
can't
you.
have 2 motions in front of us, so I need to turn to Jeff Tashner
Yeah.
and see if he would like to rescind his motion and defer to you.
And Madam
So,
Chair,
Jeff-
before that, I'm going to have, I guess it's a point of information. Is it not possible for us to issue the short 2-3 paragraph report that you mentioned and defer consideration? It could be either yes or no on the full report to a further meeting. That was what my motion was.
Okay, well, I didn't understand your motion, because it made it sound like you were just tabling, which is different. So you're making a motion to issue the very short, whatever, 3 to 4 paragraphs that we'll have to the members of the General Assembly and the governor, and then we'll wait until we have a final report. Is that your motion?
What my motion was, to clarify, was to issue the very short report now to meet the dictates of Senate Bill 29, but to defer consideration of this draft report to our next meeting, whenever it's scheduled for, to allow us additional time to digest it, recognizing, and this is nobody's fault, we've had it for less than 40 hours, plus to be able to consider the public comment we heard today. And if that's possible, that's what I'd like to do. If that's not possible, I'll withdraw my motion and make a motion to not act on the draft report, but to go with the abbreviated report instead.
Your latter is what would be feasible and appropriate, because you do not have, we are not going to be coming back and forth. I think your latter recommendation was to make the recommendation that we send the abbreviated summary, and we'll continue, just send the abbreviated summary versus the draft report. And
For purposes of parliamentary procedure, I'll withdraw my initial motion, and I move to go with the abbreviated report in order to satisfy the requirements of Senate Bill 29.
thank you. And then we have a second before with Representative Ramon, and we.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All
Yes.
right. And then now we'll go to discussion on that motion. And I see, are there any questions from subcommittee members? Secretary Geisenberger's hands up.
So, I mean, I think inevitably that we're going to agree that we're going to do a short report for purposes
A
of
final
meeting
report
first.
problem.
My question is about, and I guess I would like to hear from the chair and the vice chairs about what is the process for getting to a, whatever you want to call it, an interim report, initial report that will help define the scenarios that we do want to look at.
I think
So if I can finish, I'm interested in what is the process after this to get to where we need to get to, so that we can then begin to do this analysis of what these scenarios are. A couple of other comments that I think are important to make in light of the discussion that was just had by some members, that one particular thing that was stated, and I think it might have been by Representative Oberly, that I would not want any retiree to leave this meeting thinking was the case, was he seemed to imply that this report, and if it's written in a way that says this, it absolutely needs to be corrected. None of this impacts at all when people can retire and get their pension. This is about what people's eligibility is for healthcare and what the state subsidy is for healthcare at the time of retirement, as opposed to whether or not somebody gets their pension. I don't know if Bill misspoke or there's something in the report that misstates it, but I wouldn't want anyone that's listening to this to think that this in any way, any of the options being considered by this committee, I don't even think it's part of the committee's charge to look at any changes to when people can retire and become eligible for their pension. As it relates to Medicare Advantage, another comment I would have is, regardless of whether this committee decides that they want to grandfather current people over 65 or people who have already retired as it relates to Medicare Advantage, I would say that, quote unquote, taking it off the table as an option for any future retiree, I would say is an irresponsible approach to take. And I don't see a report that I would be comfortable voting for that would permanently take Medicare Advantage off the table as an idea or a concept. It is obviously something that, millions and millions and millions of Americans are already on. It may not be something that fits for people who are currently retired from the state. It may be something only for people who retire in the future or retire 10 years from now. But I think taking it entirely off the table, as was suggested by some people, as an option would be irresponsible by us in light of, the fact that, tens of millions of people have a plan. And I think the customized plan that the state developed is very, very different from the plan that many Americans are on. But either way, taking it entirely off the table would not make sense to me.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate that, and don't know if you have anything else. I kind of gave you a little credence beyond the motion that is before us in a second, but I felt like you haven't commented in a while and have the right to speak as such. Any other discussion on the motion before us? And again, I want to make it very clear that this motion is to allow the committee to not be sending this draft summary report, but a very succinct 3 to 4 paragraphs update of process and extension, given the SEBC's meeting with the MedicFil going into next year. And we can then make a determination at a later date. I believe that my colleagues, my co-chairs, Representative Bombach and Senator Townsend, would agree that it is really important that we get to the latter parts of this agenda and we lay out a schedule as Faith started the meeting today. And I don't envision that we'll probably even have to have an interim report. I have a hope, my hope is we have a final report in the fall. Representative Bombach or Senator Townsend, do you want to weigh in on that discussion with the motion before us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think it makes sense then to do a very terse report that relates to the fact that FY24 has already been decided with regard to the extension of MedicFil for the entirety of FY24, and then to continue the subcommittee's work digging into a variety of topics, and apparently perhaps to revisit previous topics to try and see what consensus can be achieved. Whatever we call it, Medicare Advantage or whatever else, frankly, labels can be important, but I think most important is figuring out how to have a robust healthcare plan that is sustainable, that might adopt certain features that were not previous to MedicFil supplement, but that does not deviate from the importance of having strong healthcare benefits for retirees. So labels are important, no doubt, but I think we need to move past labels to some extent and get into additional details.
Okay, great. Representative Bombach.
Yeah, I think that Mr. Tashner's comments about the subcommittee members needing more time to digest both the draft report and the public comment really sways me. And I like the idea of submitting a very brief and accurate summary to the governor and legislature is the best move at this time.
Okay, all right. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak? Because if not, we have a vote before us. Anybody here? Oh, Rep. Overly, is your hand up on purpose or?
Yes, it is, but it's not appropriate this time, but I did want to later to Representative Geisenberger, excuse me, Secretary Geisenberger's comments.
All right, and we'll maybe be able to do those later. All right, so the question before us has been raised that we vote to not submit as presented today this draft report, but instead a summary to the General Assembly, the governor's office, explaining the extension that we now have, and that we will continue with our efforts through the summer. So call the question. All in favor, voting members only, signal by saying aye.
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 The most important things I want to hear, any nays, this is what you have to do, any nays.
I voted yes.
You're a no, we have one no.
I voted yes.
You voted yes, no, okay, and any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion is hereby passed. We're going to take this report. I do want to publicly thank the DHR team and Kristen and others who really worked really hard to put this together very quickly for us. I hope this is a foundational tool for a structural maybe outline that can be used. And I know Wayne, we have taken some of your outline, and those who gave us feedback will move forward. I am very optimistic that we're going to do a lot of work over the next 2 months and have that final report. So why don't we move forward at this time, and I'll turn it to Faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. And if I may, I just doing a time check. It's 11 a.m. We have two agenda items to discuss in the remaining hour. Would the subcommittee prefer to first discuss the OPEB options for further evaluation ahead of any discussion on the HRA marketplace overview? Just because I think that might be more productive for us for future agendas.
Okay, why don't you go there?
Okay, all right, so with that said, we're gonna put up a brief deck that was included in the meeting materials titled Options to Reduce OPEB Liability. This presentation was put together by the SEBC consultants, as well as Towers Watson. We have them join virtually this morning. I'm going to ask that they walk us through this deck, but again, I want to caveat the discussion by saying, this is simply a collection of the options that have been previously brought up for further discussion. And I think the goal this morning is to get feedback from subcommittee members on which you would like to move forward so that we can prioritize future agendas.
So,
now, it looks like we've got Christia Vanello from Towers Watson on camera. Chris, are you going to be able to start to walk us through these options?
As long as you can hear me.
We can, loud and clear.
All right, I never know anymore. So yeah, thank you, Faith. And I think you teed this up perfectly. So this is a short deck. It is meant to just be a list of options, many of which have either been discussed previously with the RBSC or with this committee as well. We have some options here that have been requested specifically by certain committee members. And then we have a list of just some other options for potential consideration. So the goal is really to start narrowing down the focus and really either cross some of these options off the list or to identify which options the committee would like to see explored further. So if we want to jump ahead in the slide deck. So on slide 4, again, the goal really to identify which options we want to consider further, which options we want to eliminate, and really just have a discussion about ultimately where the committee would like to take, the future analyses and conversations. So if we jump ahead to slide 5, the first set of options here, these were the options that were previously reviewed at the April 17th RHBAS meeting. Again, we continue to break it down into the 3 different buckets of options, if you will. So funding options, so looking at 1%, 2%, or 3% additional funding. The eligibility option, so reducing the spousal state share, increasing the graduated state share based on years of service, eliminating future vested retirees from eligibility, or increasing the minimum required age. And then the benefit changes that we had looked at, which include moving to an HRA arrangement with the individual marketplace, or moving to the Highmark Group Medicare Advantage plan. Again, we want to reiterate, these aren't one-size-fits-all options. So we do want to emphasize, taking a funding option alongside an eligibility option, alongside a benefit change. Combining those will have the greatest impact on the OPEB liability, and will also help minimize the impact on any one particular cohort. So we don't need to just focus on any one particular option. We can look at these we can look at these together with other particular options. On slide 6, then we have.
And before you go on to that, again, I just want to reiterate, when people are looking at this, for members of the public, when we talk about these eligibility options, we're talking about future retirees. We are not talking about current retirees. And we are talking about, again, this was reviewed by the Retirement Benefit Study Committee. We are talking about healthcare only. This does not affect the schedule on which somebody can retire. Just to be clear with everyone.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Secretary Geisenberger. Great point. So slide 6, we've also compiled some options that have been requested at prior meetings with this committee. So one would be codifying the 1% state contribution, changing the premium structure for all retirees to pay a minimum of 5%. So we've had a lot of conversations about the actual contributions for the Medicare population and how it varies by state share. So requiring all retirees to pay a minimum of 5% is an option on the table. No health insurance for future term vested employees. And then also looking at eligibility. So eligibility requirements have been changed in the past. So previously for those hired after January 1st of 1991, as well as January 1st of 2012. And then again, for those hired after January 1st of 2007. So looking at different eligibility options for the state based on age or years of service. So potentially those hired after 1/1/2014. So different eligibility options, of course, would be a consideration, but this particular one specifically requested by the committee, so wanted to include it as well. And then on slide 7, we have more of a laundry list of other potential options for consideration. Some maybe have been discussed in passing, but generally have not had a deeper dive into some of these potential options as we have with others. So grandfathering, so there's many different sort of angles you could take with grandfathering, but grandfathering current retirees and allowing future retirees to move to the Highmark Group Medicare Advantage plan, grandfathering current retirees and allowing future retirees to move to the HRA or individual marketplace approach. We can look at other grandfathering options as well in conjunction with where future retirees could potentially move. So that would be a discussion item for the committee. We've talked about maintaining Medicare with potential plan design changes, so increasing member cost sharing to lower the burden on the state and effectively reduce the OPEB liability, maintaining Medicare with increased retiree contribution share, so similar to the option that we discussed on the prior slide where we would require all retirees to pay 5%. Options to look at both a group Medicare Advantage plan that could be customized to look similar to Medicare as alongside an HRA individual marketplace approach. Rating groups on their own experience has been brought up. Again, that is more of a sort of premium conversation as opposed to a liability conversation, but we can certainly look at what that would look like. a lot of the conversation focused so far on post-65 retirees, but as we've seen previously, a big chunk of the OPEB liability is attributable to the pre-65 retirees, both current retirees as well as actives that will ultimately age into pre-65 retirement. So looking at plan design or contribution changes for that population would also have an impact on the OPEB liability. Other items suggested offering group Medicare Advantage side by side with MedicFill, but higher contributions to stay in MedicFill, offering active or early retiree plans on a coordinated with Medicare basis, and then offering an HRA approach for the pre-65 retiree population as well. So we had talked about this approach at least with the SEBC or potentially just the subcommittee in conjunction with rating groups on their own experience. So one of the consequences of rating groups on their own is a significant increase in pre-65 retiree contributions. There would be an opportunity to explore opportunities to lower the burden on those pre-65 retirees, and an HRA approach could be an angle there if rating groups on their own experience was a desired outcome of the committee. This would be a way to reduce the burden on pre-65 retirees while also reducing that OPEB liability. So these are just a list of options, again, not an exhaustive list. So if there are other options the committee would like to see studied, we are open to having that conversation, as well as if there's any options here that we think are not worth pursuing any further, we can then cross them off the list. Each of these options, mind you, will have a different impact on the OPEB liability. So they would require additional analysis with the Chiron team to value the impacts. So ultimately, that would be the next step. Once we've identified options to consider, we'll have those additional analyses completed so that we can understand which of these will actually help solve the problem more than others, or based on that analysis, are there more clearly identified options that should be striked off the list moving forward. So again, meant to be a conversation now. I see Secretary Geisenberger has his hand up. So
can you, I think I understood most of these, and obviously a lot of these can be combined with the grandfather options, right? So some of the ones toward the bottom presumably would be, but can you, the next to last one, offer active early retiree plans on a coordinated with Medicare basis. Can you describe that? I'm not familiar with that. What is that? That's people who are, an active early retiree plan is, what's that mean? Someone who's under 65? I'm not sure I understand what that one is.
Yeah, that's a good question, and maybe I'll defer that one to someone else on the team. I think this would
Chris,
be
I can
more.
jump in on that one. So
yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
essentially, the current plans that are offered to retirees and pre-65s make those available to Medicare retirees, but then as a wrap around Medicare, so coordinating with Medicare, which would still pay primary. Does that answer the question? So basically take the current PPO and the other options that are offered to actives and pre-65s, make those available to Medicare eligible retirees, but coordinated with Medicare so that Medicare is still paying primary.
Let me try to restate that. You're saying taking the pre-65 plans that are currently available and making them available to people who are over 65?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
I didn't know
Secretary
I didn't realize that was even an option, but if that's
Secretary
allowed.
Matthews wants to weigh in.
A couple of things. First, when Chris refers to Chiron, there are pension actuaries. I think that's important for everybody to know. Second, on this point about offering the choices that pre-65 retirees have to Medicare pensioners, keep in mind, those plans require prior authorizations. We've had prior authorizations for active employees and pre-65 retirees for decades. So keep that in mind as we talk about prior authorizations. The third point that I think is important when you talk about the OPEB liability is that, to remind everybody that when pensioners and all of us say that, you were promised a certain plan, that things beyond our control changed. And Dave, you know this better than everybody. 2002, GASB changed the rules in terms of how we account for an unfunded liability like the retiree healthcare is. And then in 2017, the agency bond rating agencies required that an unfunded liability like our retiree healthcare plan be counted towards the criteria for our bond rating. So, you know, it's not like the SEBC or any administration just decides we're going to change pension or healthcare. I think what's important to inject into this conversation are the outside factors that have changed starting in 2002, heightening in 2017, that have brought us to the position that we're at right now.
Thank you for that clarification. And I know that's an important concept members of the General Assembly and they've looked to look at this matter. And I think Secretary Geisenberger, your point was well taken that, you know, these are just beginning conversation options. You know, you can have the grandfathering in different sections across these. You can have, you know, many different coordinates. I think at the end of the day, trying to figure out a good path forward. Our goal here is not to be addressing current employees, but to be actually looking at the retiree population now and in the future options and a list of recommendations that will then be considered by the General Assembly and certainly ultimately with the SEBC. Representative Overly, you or Mike Mercado have a comment or thoughts on these or want to add something?
Yeah, just a comment on page 6, the last item mentioned is what I was referring to earlier. And perhaps I didn't state it clearly enough that if you require state employees to work longer in order to get a state share, it has an impact on the pension fund. That was my point. I don't know what that impact might be, but clearly I know that most state employees are dialed in pretty clearly on when they receive their benefits and at what level they will receive their benefits. And if I'm told I have to work another 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years in order to secure that state share, then I'm going to do it, which has an impact on the pension fund. That was my point.
I have a difficult time hearing Bill.
Yeah,
Anybody else does. It's very muffled.
I heard his comment, what I heard him say.
I was able to hear it, and I understand, Bill. I just wanted to, if that's what you were saying, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to be sure.
Rick, do you want to repeat
wanted to
what
be
you
sure that
heard?
there wasn't any. I think what Bill is saying is that if you do change the eligibility based upon a minimum retirement age, or you set the, you change the years of service, that it will impact. It will have an influence on when people decide to retire, and that ultimately that. And I think that Faith has said that the average, or maybe it was Joanne said at a RBSC meeting, that the average state employee or state retiree has 22 years of service, I think she said, which probably, is not coincidental that it's after 20 years that you vest in fully, in the full state share of healthcare. So I think what Bill is saying is that if you add a few years, it probably will impact people's behavior, and then that behavioral impact ultimately has impacts on the pension fund. I don't know that those are negative or positive impacts on the pension fund. I mean, I think if people serve another 2 or 3 years, their pension will probably be a little bit bigger because they'll have gotten pay raises during that period of time. So I wouldn't think there'd be any negative impact on the pension fund. But I think that's what Bill was trying to say, not that it. So I appreciate that clarification. I think it's an important one, and especially with the public listening, none of these things that are being considered by this committee change when people can retire and get their full pension. But Bill is probably right that it probably will influence people's behavior as to when they retire. Is that an accurate portrayal of what you just said, Bill?
Yes, apparently the microphone here is not very good, but that's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks. Thank you for that. Okay, so this is our opportunity, folks. Comments, thoughts, go ahead, Faith.
You go first.
No, I was just going to suggest for the sake of progress that perhaps we discuss the items the subcommittee members are strongly opposed to further evaluation of, and try to narrow the list that way.
I have 3 ads. Do you want them now or later?
We'll take ads too. So if there's objections, additions, go ahead.
I think these are 3 ads that we go into funding. The first is to increase the OPEB employer contribution from the present 0.36% up to, I think it was at one time, 2.08%, is that right? I think it was whatever, at one time previously it was above 2%. So I think it was 2.08%. The second funding option,
Rick,
Yes, if I can clarify that, there was a presentation that was made earlier by a retiree that indicated that at one point it was 2.08%. It never was 2.08%. I think the top it's ever been was 0.9%. However, there have been one-time contributions that have been made periodically that we showed in a subsequent presentation to this body. That at one point brought it up to, I think at one point there was a 3% or a 3.1% contribution in 1 year because they made a big contribution of unclaimed property revenue on a one-time basis. So you could certainly, propose, the governor has proposed this 1% of the budget proposal. You've got the 0.36% that's been there for at least the last 6 years. We could certainly look at it being, and I think that's in the previous slides, looking at what happens if you do 1%, 2%, or 3%. I think modeling those will give us the answer to what Wayne is suggesting here.
okay, but it's slightly different to have an OPEB employer contribution than it is to have a state funding, as you know. And that's why I think it ought to be looked at in terms of the positive and negative.
Well, I think both are an employer contribution. Are you proposing an employee contribution?
Well, I am, but that's the second one.
Oh, okay.
What I'm saying is if you do an OPEB employer contribution, that does not come all out of state funds. The 1% carve out does, but an employer contribution comes out of school district funds, it comes out of federal funds that are passed through, so I somewhat.
do you want to have that as a consideration to
Yes, I do.
explore? Okay.
Yes. And the second is to increase the present employees pay a percentage or have deducted from their pay a percentage towards the pension fund. I believe for many folks it's 3%. I think for others it's 5%. And I'm proposing we look at that the committee look at increasing that by 1% and also by 2%, and that those funds would be required to go into the OPEB. When I started teaching, I paid 5% as a deduction. Later on, it was reduced to 3%.
Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so to follow up on Wayne, this is Dave Craig. So back in the 90s, when we first created the OPEB funding, we looked at that to see if we would have employee money come. And the discussion centered around if you have the employees start paying, you now guarantee that benefit. So like these future unfunded liabilities that are huge, billions of dollars, would then be a direct liability that the state has no control over if you have employees paying money into the trust.
Well, and that was done quite some time ago. There's been a number of changes in the law. Let's be sure that would be true.
Sure.
Yeah, I just adding on to what David said, I mean, that's a real issue, which obviously when people pay into their pension, the 3% or 5% contribution, it's because we are in fact guaranteeing a very specific benefit that they'll get monetarily based on their years of service, right, Dave? Whereas with healthcare, we're not doing that. And if you have an employee contribution, I think it makes it very difficult to make future changes to plans, which inevitably we're going to have to. So obviously we'd have to do a legal analysis there to see what the current state of law is.
Then I think we should.
Okay. I think that's the first step, as opposed to modeling it, is to understand the legal ramifications. Because we can do a lot of modeling and it won't mean anything unless we fully understand the legal ramifications of doing that.
And I think any of the options that are put out today, makes sense, before we go into delving into the analytics, if it is something feasible that we can do and legally, yep. Anything else, Mr. Cookbook over here? He's like got a whole wizardry of ideas. Love it. That's nice. Anyone else have thoughts, ideas?
Lieutenant Governor, this is
Your
Jeff. I
last-
just have a
We got Jeff.
follow-up question on Wayne's suggestion, and Secretary Geisenberg can clarify this for me. The carve-out is based on the entire state budget. The employer contribution would just be based on payroll. And I believe those generate different numbers. So as part of the whole process of evaluating this, I assume someone will let us know what each of those would generate. And just to go back to, Wayne's comment about school district salaries, the most significant portion of those is through the state budget. So my immediate reaction is the carve out is going to generate a greater contribution than any increase in the employer contribution, but I'd like to see that. What I also think would be helpful is we have suggestions for 1%, 2%, 3%. A lot of times when we bargain, what we like to know is what's the value of a 0.5%, so that as we look at this, we may come up and say, look, we don't know that we can afford 2%, but 1.5% gets us X amount. So I'm interested in like, what does a 0.5% or a 0.25% increment of a carve out give us in terms of a contribution based on the current and projected budget amounts? And what does that do to our overall percentage of OPEB liability? So as we walk forward, we can make some kind of informed decision of what do we think the appropriate carve out amount is? Is it 1, 2, 3, 1 3/4? I think there's a lot of options that we have to consider, and I'd like to know that incremental value.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that obviously depends on the growth in the budget, but I'm sure the analysis can be done.
Yeah, I know it's going to change over time as the budget grows, but it gives us a little bit of a ballpark to try to anticipate what we can gain in terms of OPEB liability relief with the carve out option.
Right. The other point I think is important for us to make in all of these analysis, and I know you know this, Jeff, as a member of the Retirement Benefit Study Committee, is that, you've got the OPEB contribution side of it, but you've also got the percentage of payroll piece that's built into the state's annual operating budget. And the two combine to be what is to cover what are the actual costs of retiree healthcare. And while, if you make the assumption that you're going to continue to do that percentage of payroll number to cover retiree healthcare on a pay-go basis, it does turn out that doing 1% or making it a 2% or a 3% contribution has a huge impact on reducing the OPEB liability, but you also have this rising percentage of payroll number that if you make no changes to any of the way the plans are designed for current or future retirees, that number is going to keep going up, 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 up. So you need to look at the two in combination. Both what you're contributing to OPEB as well as what it's costing you on a pay-go basis based on different plan designs.
Other comments from folks? Representative Oberly?
Hopefully you can hear me. In terms of reducing the OPEB liability moving forward, it seems to me that the one option that is left off is perhaps as important, if not more important than the others, and that's trying to contain what we currently pay or reduce what we currently pay for healthcare. There was an interesting report by Christine Vogel that was submitted to the SEBC at the last meeting, where we are paying the 7th and the 11th highest rates for inpatient and outpatient treatment at hospital facilities in the state of Delaware. Now, you may not think this is related, but certainly overpaying for healthcare has exacerbated the OPEB liability. And I'll give you a couple of examples that have been shared with the subcommittee and I believe the SEBC that demonstrate the cost disparities that the state is currently paying for service rendered. In an emergency room, we currently pay on average $1,283 for services. At an urgent care facility, a freestanding facility, we pay $109 for the same services. And it goes on. I mean, these disparities exist in radiology, they exist in labs. So unless we begin to wrestle with the genesis of what I consider to be our problem, I believe, we're just circling the drain here. And I know Jeff may want to weigh in on this because we've been at this for over 15 years in terms of how do you begin to control prices reasonably in the state or what the state pays. It's just, from my perspective, it's out of control. It's like the 800-pound gorilla in the room that nobody wants to deal with. So I lay that out as an option in terms of trying to control the OPEB liability moving forward, and that is to begin to address the price disparities that exist in our state between freestanding preferred facilities and hospital facilities.
Thank you for that. That is a central focus for the SEBC, and appreciate that comment. Anyone else here, anybody online? Because these are the kind of directions that we're giving. Are we missing items?
So I have
Go ahead.
another item.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think it's new, but the items on page 6 is what I asked for last week, so I'd like to see those, but maybe add a for future retirees after a certain date, and the date I used in the last vote was 1/1/214, is make that Medicare Advantage their only option at 65 for those hired after that date.
Hired after what date?
1/1/14.
2014. And any reason you picked 2014?
Because at this point, they're not vested in the pension plan.
Great. So, thank you.
Did everybody hear him? They couldn't hear you. Can you speak a little louder? They're
Sure.
shaking their head.
Okay, so I would add that we look at a Medicare Advantage as the only options for those hired after 1/1/2014.
So you would like them to study that as an
Yes,
option?
the cost of that.
So the study of the option.
So we'd
Okay.
be grandfathering all retirees and anybody hired prior to that date.
Right. Right, because we also have them studying the HRAs.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, since they're looking at the HRA, to look at the Medicare Advantage for future retirees. All of you experienced retirees, thinking of your friends forward who are on this subcommittee, have we gotten your thoughts and recommendations? Because if so, we can mark this agenda item off our list. To my co-chairs, anyone have anything from my co-chairs to add? What are you laughing at?
I was just commenting, I didn't hear any removals from the list,
Oh.
only adds, so obviously we'll have to take back
Yeah.
and work through prioritizing these options and the timing on which we could come back to the subcommittee with a deep analysis of the
Can you go back-
impacts and the
Can you
costs.
go back to the list? Can you go back to the list? I'm quickly looking over this in my own mind as to.
Oh, no,
whether
now
there's
we see
anything
the thought box over your head, Rick, that's
Yes, whether there's anything here we could take off, but. Can we talk a little bit about the rate groups on their own experience? What groups, obviously I know there's the pre-Medicare retirees. Was that the main one you were thinking of, Faith, on this one, or?
Potentially, but Chris, would you mind in 30 seconds summarizing this discussion as we've had it with SEBC and the other subcommittees?
Yeah, so this has definitely been discussed as a potential OPEB scenario. I think the conversations we've had, this is really about premiums and what the different groups, active pre-65 retirees and Medicare retirees pay as their share of the premium equivalent rates. I think as far as an OPEB liability reduction measure, this will have a very limited impact because we're not changing the cost. We would only be changing what the different cohorts are paying in contributions. So it's been suggested. I think this is more of a SEBC conversation around future premiums than it is a OPEB measure. That's just my sense, though.
I think that's probably the case. I mean, this would make a big difference if most of the pre-Medicare retirees were paying 50 or 60% of their premium, but when they're only paying 13% of the premium, there is a very significant implicit, we've talked about the implicit subsidy as it relates to the pre-65 population versus the active active employees where as people are older, they consume more healthcare. So, but I think you're right, given the percentage subsidy the state provides anyway, I'm not sure I think it's more of an SEBC conversation than it is an OPEB conversation.
Jeff, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and based on my familiarity with this issue over the last 15 to 18 years, I would agree with the secretary. I think this is an issue that the SEBC needs to consider and take up at some point, but I don't think it applies to our charge as a retirement health benefit advisory subcommittee. And I would suggest taking that off the list and focusing on the other items.
Okay, so noted. If anyone here.
Yeah, I think we should just note that we're not taking it off the consideration for SEBC, just for purposes of the retiree
Committee. Any discussion around that from anyone or not? Do you have another thought? Another item.
So I do too, but Dave should go first.
All right.
So this is just me. I have no interest on reducing the spousal estate share. I mean, there's been no discussion. I haven't heard any discussion on that. So I think that's something we could revisit.
Or potentially for further discussion by the SBC.
Yeah.
Because I think.
Yeah.
That's an SEBC topic. Okay. All right.
I might want to make sure I understand that.
Go ahead, say what you're doing.
So,
are you removing that from the prior page?
Yes.
And it would be at SEBC is what he's saying. Any thoughts?
I don't agree. I like Dave a lot, but I don't agree with him.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with Dave on that one either. So whether it should be 50% or 75%, I mean, again, the idea is, especially as it relates to future retirees. I mean, this is about future retirees, not current. This is not about current retirees. This is about future retirees, Dave.
Okay.
All right, so we're keeping it on for future. Okay, we're gonna close out the clock here. Other comments? Oh, you had another one, Wayne?
Yeah, if we assume for the moment, back on page 7, the first two, grandfather and no change for current retirees, the first two have that. Am I to assume that then is Medicare if there's no change? I guess, Chris, you would be the person to answer that.
Well, again, Medicare is a registered trademark. So, if we go out to RFP, it won't necessarily be Medicare.
It'll be a supplement.
Well, I'm looking farther down the page and it uses the term Medicare there, and that's, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, in terms of, when you said no change for current retirees, were you assuming that it would be a Medicare like medical in small letters plan?
So it's Medicare supplement plan.
Yep, Chris.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Agree with that.
Okay,
so if those two are true, so if that's true for those two, then that would take care, I think, the first one would take care of what Dave was asking for, those hired after 114. It would sort of clarify exactly when to study the difference, when to look at the difference. Does that make sense?
What date to use, yeah.
Yes. So in other words, you could combine what Dave just said, what David asked for the folks hired after 114 with the first item.
Yes.
Trying to shorten the list for you, Chris.
Margaret at Chiron will appreciate that.
Exactly.
And I think that the offer MI side by side, offer MA was side by side with Medicville. I personally don't think that needs to be looked at.
I disagree with that, particularly for those employees retirees that I know that I've heard from that want the Medicare Advantage because of the lower cost.
Okay.
So keep it for now.
Yeah, it's fine.
Keep it for now as an option, or for, like you indicated, future employees, current and future. Okay. Anything else? Because we have given them a ton of work. All right. Today, we are not going to be able to go through the HRAs, which I think are one of our options moving forward. And to Willis Towers Watson, thank you for preparing item 7, the HRA individual marketplace overview. Hopefully everyone began to take a skim over that. That is something obviously for consideration. I think especially as we look to future retirees and other options. So we'll add that to our next agenda if everyone's okay with that. Because I think it's important to get public comment. And I don't have in front of us to share a whole lot on what we'll send to the General Assembly or the governor, but something that I have here quickly. I'm going to read this. It's not done enough to stick up there because I always have like typos and things. So it's something to the effect for what we'll send. We'll just have a quick summary about the Retiree Benefits Committee established for Senate Bill 29. Considering various of the analyses, it'll have another paragraph just saying 7 public meetings, our website link, and let's try it here. So it'd be something very, very simple. And because the SEBC voted on April 24th to further extend Medicville, and it will just list the current state with funding, and make a reference to our committee location at DHR. So something to that effect. So I just wanted you all to know, still working on the language. Is that good? All right, so instead of submitting that draft, and again, thank you all so much for the staff who worked really hard. Consider it like a student who did their paper way early, and you've got you get credit, and you've got the foundation for a future report. So you get really good credit. You get a star today. All right. With that, we can move into public comment unless others from the committee have something to update.
So I think we should go back to the people who pre-registered and said that they would like to speak at the end. So the first person is Barbara Philbin.
Barbara, if you're still with us.
Hang on,
maybe we will. Barbara stars. We're going to unmute you. Star 6. There you are, Barbara.
Thank you. At last week's meeting, Mr. Emsley and Tajner recommended that a Medicare Advantage only option for retirees or default not be recommended by the committee. I wholeheartedly agree with them, so please take it off the table and heed their advice. I was thinking about asking some questions today, but decided to look at Delaware's healthcare liability budget problem from a historical perspective. So here it goes. Delaware's leaders seem to be facing a watershed moment as they tried to build consensus on how best to address a long-term healthcare budget problem. Looking back, I think the paths of some of your predecessors took just might help you. Let's take, for instance, the actions and words of 2 great leaders who moved this country forward, not backward, even during a precarious time in our nation's history. It starts back in 1977 when Vice President Hubert Humphrey addressed what he called the moral test of government, that he went on to say can be found in how a country writes its budget. The moral test of government, Humphrey said, is how the government treats those who are in the dawn of life, the children, Those of us who are in the budget twilight of life, the elderly, sick and needy, all spelled out in the nation's budget. A little earlier in the 60s, when President Lyndon Johnson signed Medicare and Medicaid into law, he articulated the following: no longer will this nation refuse the hand of justice to those who have given a lifetime of service and wisdom and labor to the progress of this country. We hope you heed your predecessors' advice and do the right things for those of us who have given a lifetime of service and wisdom and labor to Delaware, and who now in the twilight of life face a future of uncertainty at the hands of a government who seems to think we are an irrelevant OPEB liability. Prove me wrong, please, and grandfather us in, because it is the fair and decent thing to do. For those of us now in the twilight of life, like your predecessors did, please heed their advice, especially since we cost the state 1/4 per person of what actives cost. Let's move forward, not backward. As we used to, coming from education, I'm going to leave the rest of this out. This is what we used to tell our students: no worry, we know next time you will do better. So Delaware this time around can do also. So to conclude, remember that the path you take at this pivotal moment will define Delaware and what the state stands for. Thank you.
Thank you. Right at the second. Go ahead.
Okay, next up is Nancy Altieri. Let me find her. Here she is.
Nancy Altieri. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Really, I was going to discuss HRAs. So my name is Nancy Altieri. I guess I'm concerned because I don't understand why anyone would want an HRA, since the middle letter is R for reimbursement, which means as retirees, we will have to pay up front and hope to be reimbursed. I read this description of an HRA plan from Health Equity, which states, your organization sets your annual healthcare reimbursement limit and determines which expenses are eligible. To me, here we go again with a company controlling monies and services for our healthcare. And HR plans entail healthcare costs, which the retiree must pay out of pocket, followed by filling out paperwork. The retiree must file requesting reimbursement without assurance of payment, since the word request implies a possibility of denial. The characteristics of an HRA plan are reminiscent of the pitfalls of the proposed Medicare Advantage plan, which requires retirees to be in a continuous heightened state of vigilance over what services and benefits will be covered and the potential for hidden costs in each. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, in the room.
Sir?
Yes.
Can you state your name, please?
Yes, David Taylor. I have a handout. here,
Sure,
just
thank
one
you,
page.
Mr. Taylor. We will make sure we share those later online. And while we're speaking of online and letting him hand this out before he starts, some of you had requested about the video. We will work hard with our technology folks and staff to try to get that either by the end of today or up tomorrow. I think Mary, you had asked that, and so we will work hard. It always depends on our technology and staff partner. All right, are you ready, sir?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right.
My name is David Taylor. I worked at William Penn High School for 35 years. I was a teacher, coach, counselor, and assistant principal. Over the years, I've had several health issues. I've had 2 heart attacks, 3 strokes, 2 stage 4 cancers.
Oh, well.
Yes, stage 4, and a complete kidney failure, where I was in the hospital for 5 days receiving dialysis treatments, 4-hour treatments, and weren't working. Finally, I have recovered. Fortunately, I have recovered from all these.
Wow.
Now, I attribute my recovery to several things. Number 1, the grace of God. Number 2, the wonders of modern medicine. the knowledge and skill of my doctors and nurses, and the fact that I could get the tests, treatments, and medicines that I needed without any unnecessary bureaucratic delays, red tape, or prior approval. I got what I needed when I needed it. Now, as we look at this, I'm still having to talk about Medicare Advantage because I understand it's still on the table. I was hoping it wouldn't be, but as I see that this problem that you have currently, you have three parts of the framework to solve it: funding, eligibility, and design. I believe that the design, Medicare Advantage, take it or leave it, is no good. Other people have talked about it several times, and I only have 3 minutes. I just would point out one thing to you was, you may remember when they were building the bridge across the inlet several years ago. The design was bad. They were building a bridge in the wrong place. It kept falling down. They didn't stubbornly cling to it. They admitted it. Hey, this is bad. Back to the drawing board, come up with a new plan. It works. It works very well. I've been over it several times. Funding. Currently, you have 3 buckets for funding. Number 1 is the current employees, retirees, and taxpayers. All retirees are not the same. And we talked about difference here. Medicare retirees pay at least $164 a month for their Medicare. The state share is $459. Pre-Medicare retirees pay a low of $30 a month to a high of $119. The state share ranges from $725 to $750. So they're not the same. What I passed out on this chart indicates what I paid throughout my working career. All the years that I worked, you'll see that 1 year, $909 in December. So I paid my Medicare. As the situation goes, the saying goes, I paid my dues. I want what I paid for. My full Medicare, not some watered down Medicare Advantage. Finally, eligibility. I heard the word grandfather. That's great. If you would get the word out to people that they're going to be grandfathered, that would make things a lot easier for you. You wouldn't have to have people up here. You can do the 20 years people, raise it up a little bit gradually over time, 22, 25, 27. And they did that for Social Security, for the age.
Sorry, sir, your time is up.
Okay, I'll finish it up. Thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it. And good luck.
Thank you, Coach. I don't have time to watch TV, but I hear that Coach last, that was a great attitude. You must have a good attitude to come out beating stage 4 cancer. All right.
Anybody else in the room? You have, okay. So go back online to Steve L. Could you please state your last name?
Yep.
Steve LePage. Okay.
And we will be stopping at noon, and we'll take public comments online if we miss people today. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. LePage?
Can you hear us, Steve? We'll come back to Steve.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we can. Go ahead.
Oops. Yes, we can hear you.
Uh-oh.
Mr. LePage, can
Shoot. Technology. Right, we'll come back to
okay,
him.
we'll come back around. Diana Noonan.
Diana?
Thank you. I would like to make further comment on the idea of the retirees have been given the time or occasion to make meaningful contributions and comments. I am concerned with the fact that retiree comments are condensed and lumped together and not fairly represented both in draft committee report, but also in the meeting minutes. The intent of our comments and the substance are not represented in the minutes nor the draft report. I would hope going forward that appropriate changes would be made to better disclose state retiree comments. Secondly, Secretary Demanis stated in this meeting that there are hundreds of pensioners who wanted Medicare Advantage because they cannot afford their medical cost. Well, there are thousands of pensioners who do not want Medicare Advantage. Those pensioners who support MA most likely do not understand the underlying cost of Medicare Advantage, which have the very real possibility of going into thousands of dollars in cost sharing, and the idea of medical necessity and prior authorization. Secretary DeMattis stated that these people showed up at public meetings in support. I was at many public meetings and never saw one person who wanted Medicare Advantage. Those that might have wanted it in the beginning that I know of have strongly changed their minds once they learn the conditions that the plan actually entails. Hundreds versus thousands is a no-brainer, and to me, the statement, to believe the statement, I would have to see proof. However, it would not change my mind that thousands of retirees trump hundreds. I would like to add that though Medicare Advantage is a terrible option to retiree health care, there are other equally bad and untenable options being discussed. The HRA is portrayed in the draft report, puts the retiree in a horrible position of having to be reimbursed rather than having coverage. I am so sorry. Rather than having coverage paid by the insurance company. To that point, I firmly believe that I certainly believe and support the ideal that it is not appropriate, fair, moral, or even meets the standards of decency to take medical coverage away from the vulnerable retirees who have worked their lives with a promise that their health care and retirement would be excellent and covered. Grandfathering current retirees is the only option that should be on the table. If you want to change the rules on current employees and those not at retirement age yet, and new hires, that's a different matter. They will have a choice of what they accept. We planned our retirement on the premise that they would not have to plan for health care in retirement. Again, state retirees were and are woefully underpaid. Our savings are based on our working income, and we cannot take a huge financial hit at this point in our lives. Any such change would drastically affect our lives in a potentially extreme way. I have more, but I don't have time.
Thank you, Diana. We can always take comments online as well. Go ahead.
I was gonna try to go back to Steve LePage.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to address some comments that Secretary Geisenberger made. I was the one that created the OPEB yearly allocation graph. And I hope he can appreciate this because as retirees, we don't have access to the information that he has. So we have to go and look at all the public information that we could find, basically. And I went through every OMB budget report. That's almost 20 years worth of budget reports to come up with this graph. And the graph was intended to show the total cost, the total of the other and post-employment benefits. Now, he is correct that there were sometimes a one-time monies going toward OPEB, but that was few and far between. So for instance, when it was calculated, I think on the graph it was like over 3% or whatever the case may be of those higher numbers, I'm going to let you know what they were. So in 2007, under the Governor Minner's administration, OPEB was given 2.62%. The addition was a 0.30% of one time. In 2008, it was 2.52%. The addition was 0.54% in one time. In 2009, it was 2.20%. And the addition was 0.54% in one time. In 2018, the OPEB liability, the OPEB was supposed to be 0.90, but it was reduced to 0.36. And those are in the notes that I got from each and every budget report that I could find anything about for OPEB. And that goes from 2001 to 2024. So with that, I would certainly hope that Secretary Geisenberger can appreciate the extra hard work that retirees have to go through in order to find this information that's readily available to you all. Otherwise, we have to submit FOIA requests all the time. And it's a little frustrating when we don't have the information either. Thank you.
Pat Sign.
Yes, I'm here. I'm on. You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So my comment, my name's Pat Sign. I'm a retiree from the University of Delaware. I wanted to comment about the reports. After listening to the conversation today about the draft report and the need for more evaluation to reach group approval, I'm concerned about the few paragraphs will be sent to meet the May 1st deadline. There was no discussion of how this would be drafted and approved by the committee as a whole. I heard the Lieutenant Governor's summary of what she intended to draft, but it did not include the statement that has been requested numerous times and from numerous committee members, that a statement reassuring current Medicare retirees that Medicare Advantage only will not be in the final recommendations be included. I believe that this assurance at this time is the only true way to show that this committee is working towards a plan that will best serve state retirees. And I urge you to add something to that effect to those few paragraphs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll move on. I think it's what Mary and Senator Peterson.
Okay, Mary Graham.
Mary?
Yes, I'm here. I wanted to make a couple of quick points. One is Secretary Geisenberger mentioned that there was something wrong in the presentation of a retiree. I assume that he was talking about my presentation of a month ago, and I would love to know exactly which slide he's talking about and exactly what is wrong with it. So I would really appreciate it if you could maybe email me that information, Secretary Geisenberger, and if we have something wrong, I can assure you that I will be the first to admit to it. Second of all, and I think I'm going to try to send you some additional information. This business of the premiums, of course, comes up a lot. Keep in mind, retirees premiums that I call it the faux premium, the whatever it is, $4.59 a month or something, that way exceeds the actual costs per retiree. So, you got to keep that in mind when you're thinking about the premiums. So when there's a discussion of increasing the premiums, et cetera, there's no reason to do that. Lastly, I actually have one place of agreement with Secretary Geisenberger, and this might be the last time, but I do think that the spousal share, that the spousal share is not for current retirees or people coming up, of course, but I absolutely think that's a good one to look at. And I'm speaking as a spouse myself, and I may be in a different economic position than a lot of people, but I got to tell you, if you can plan and know that you're not going to get this, what I think is a really rich benefit, people can do that. And I think that is really a fair place to look for changes, and it would be consistent with the private sector. Not that I think you should have to always worry about that, but I do agree that should be looked at. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Karen Peterson, former senator.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. One thing I meant to correct earlier, and I know the proposal is not going forward today, but just for reference for the members of the subcommittee, early in the report, it says that the monthly cost for extending Medicare is $7 million a year. That is not correct. According to the WTW FY23 second quarter report, it shows that is 5.3 million a month. So just to keep that in mind going forward. Secondly, Secretary Geisenberger said that don't forget Delaware's plan is customized and it's unlike other Medicare Advantage plans. Would somebody please tell me how it's different other than the cover says Delaware instead of Massachusetts or whatever? I've read the contract and I've looked at other states' contracts. It might vary in minor points, but it's the same business model. So I'd like an explanation of how Delaware's is so very different. Secretary DeMatteis said that these hundreds of retirees who want Medicare Advantage, they attended those public sessions. Yeah, I'm sure they did. I did too. And we too believed all the propaganda that was being put forth by the state in those sessions. And so they have, if they've studied this issue, I'm sure they've since changed their minds about it. And lastly, Secretary DeMatteis said, don't forget that active employees have pre-authorizations too. I've looked at their plans. They have in the most comprehensive plan, they have about 8 pre-authorizations listed in the plan summary, compared with our 2030. So yeah, they have some, but not nearly what we would have under Medicare Advantage. I'm very disappointed that you didn't take Medicare Advantage off the table. It's a horrible plan. I wouldn't buy it for my dogs, but I guess it's going to stay on the table for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Senator. We're going to be able to take 2 more comments. I think that what has the 2 hands that are remaining up, Bob Clarkin and Mr. Jones.
Roger Jones.
Mr. Jones, you have to hit *6, sir.
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, are you there? *6. If you're not able to unmute, sir, you're always welcome to submit the comments. We'll go to Mr. Clarkin. If you want to turn. Oh, Roger, I saw him for a second. I don't know. Go back to Bob.
We're going to Bob Clark.
Bob Clarkin.
Try.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just have a real quick comment. Secretary DeMatteis said there were hundreds of people who expressed their
I had to mail each one of them.
their vote for Medicare Advantage. I'm looking at a table that was presented at your April 3rd meeting. It's has the population counts for the retirees that are on special medical. She implied that those hundreds of people were paying the whole $459 a month.
That's not what I said.
There's 24,556 people, retirees on that chart. There are a total of 155 out of 24,000 who pay $459 a month. I'd be really surprised if all 159 of them showed up at the public meetings. Thank you.
That's not what I said.
Thank you.
That's completely inaccurate. You respect it too.
Let's try to go back to Roger Jones and then we'll have to.
Mr. Jones, we'll try this one more time, sir. You have to hit *6.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would just ask the co-chairs, given that there's probably only, I guess, 5 or 6 meetings left, to really look at the process moving forward. I would also suggest that if possible, you look at perhaps no more than 2 groupings of recommendations for making a final decision, because there are a lot of variables involved, and based on the list that we went through today, a lot of different options that need to be reviewed. Also, some of the recommendations that might be offered are going to require legislative approval. So I would suggest taking the temperature of caucuses to make sure that they are viable before any final decisions are made. And finally, regarding getting input from folks, I would encourage you to leave at least 2 extended meetings for public input. And if possible, perhaps organize some kind of online polling so you can get some feedback from as many state retirees as possible. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Okay, with that, I think we have captured public comment. What?
Move to adjourn.
Yeah, and before we jump to adjourn, just some housekeeping items. We will send out our next meeting dates we're trying to nail down.
We're working to try to get those out to subcommittee members by the end of the week.
By the end of the week, and then the report. And I think folks need to please hear me again. What we would be submitting in those paragraphs are just the quick summary of actions. I think it has been loudly heard and why we're here. Senate Bill 29, and I'm looking to the coach in the room and to the others. Senate Bill 29, we are explicitly here because we have heard from retirees the concerns of having the only option of Medicare, Advantage plans. If, as we move forward, we have a slate of a runway to look at not only for you as retirees, but to the future. And so if Medicare Advantage stays in the conversation, it may be the pleasure of this committee to absolutely decide to include those for current retirees, but it also can be the decision not to do that with retirees. You know, there may be grandfathering, but that may be an option for future employees, just like HRAs. So I don't want people walking out, if you're ever dare thinking that Representative Bombach or Senator Townsend or I have not heard those of you loudly say that, and we certainly respectfully also recognize that our HR director, secretary has corresponded with those who have questions, who perhaps like the plan. But I absolutely want you to know we are not endorsing one thing or another in the memo that goes. It's just, this is what we did, this is how we met in 3 or 4 paragraphs. And so please know that. And it is my optimism that we are absolutely going to come up with what I think are some remarkable recommendations that hopefully will make current retirees and those incredibly important active employees who are working every day happy. And to those who we haven't been able to recruit yet, I know our HR director is working on recruitment, that they see plans that are incentives that they want to come work for the state of Delaware. So I don't want people leaving here with any misunderstanding. So I hope that level sets. I'm very optimistic. And with that, we had a motion to adjourn. Did we have a second? Second. Motion accepted, adjourn. All in favor, signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon. And we'll be in touch with upcoming actions. Thank you. All right.